Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome to my Halloween tour on Jerusalem. Yeah, Halloween is normally it's not a holiday from monotheism. It's not a part of Jewish culture. It's not absolutely, but it is well, at least before October 7th last year, it would be celebrated. Well, obviously, probably there are also some celebrations now, but it's very local and they're among the expats, among tourists and young people. And when it gets to Halloween tours, I like to focus on history. I like to focus on real facts, or at least on some legends that at least involve some real people, or at least there is some information registered with regards to this and that phenomenon. Hi. Hi, everyone. Hello. Hi, Julian. Good to see you. Hi. Good to see you all. So that's why, well, Jerusalem is the cradle of so many things. And it's such an ancient city that no doubt one can find a couple of spooky stories. And it doesn't have to be, okay, yes, there is that. Well, just a stupid legend of a goat roaming down the old streets of Jerusalem, which is probably true. I mean, there should be, knowing the history, there should be at least the army of ghosts. But we're going to be talking about more real things. And that's why I think they're even more spookier because they are real. I like to start with the map in case we need to we need to place us somewhere in the world map. So here we are. Today we're focusing, well, we're focusing on Jerusalem first of all. So most of the stories are actually here. However, we may have time to drop by Safed in the north of Israel, not far from Tiberias. There is a city not far from the lake Lake Kinneret. There is the Sea of Galilee. There is a city called Safed, which is one of the centers of Kabbalah, old city. And there's just one of many stories that I was thinking to tell you. But let's see how the tour goes. Let's see how much time we are going to spend in Jerusalem. And if we don't have time today, I'll definitely be doing a couple of tours on Safed anyway. So also just to place ourselves in a more direct location, we are going to be around the old city of Jerusalem. We're not really going into the old city. We will be walking in the valleys. As you know, I like to add different visual aids. So I just source them from the internet. And so what we need to know is the old city of Jerusalem is surrounded with valleys, right? It's and we know of let's just name just two of the valleys: the Hinnom Valley over here, the Kidron Valley over here, and some of the very important locations. Well, the Temple Mount is just here. The old city is this is the old city. This is the Temple Mount compound. The city of David, which is the biblical Jerusalem. It wasn't there. It's here, right? And the field of blood. What is it? And what is also hell? Because today we're also going to explore hell. Well, first of all, we'll start with the place where the two valleys converge. And we'll explore also Kidron Valley closer to the end. But let's start with the Hinnom Valley. Another view, just to place us in the right place, just to place us in the right location. This is the Temple Mount. You can see the Dome of the Rock, the Kidron Valley of the Valley of Kings, the Hinnom Valley, and well, it says the film and location. This is this is taken from the Holy Land website. So we will be also visiting one of the spots which is highly visited, especially by Christian groups. So, but let's just walk in the beautiful, lovely green. It was a chilly morning when I filmed it. It was winter. I went there with my group. Well, the Hinnom Valley. Right now, it's a lovely spot. It's very close to the City of David Foundation, which has recently turned it into a lovely recreational area for families. But here's a thing that the Hinnom Valley hasn't always looked like that. I mean, now it's so peaceful. My group is somewhere ahead of me. I just decide to slow down a bit and enjoy the views around me. However, it always would I would always feel there was something really, 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 really wrong about this place. I don't mean to say it's a bad place, but this place is infamous from ever since the Old Testament. So Gaben Hinnom, which translated from Hebrew as the Valley of the Son of Hinnom, it has a horrible reputation throughout the Old Testament and as well as the New Testament, because this place used to be the place of human sacrifice, especially children's sacrifice, and not in the times of the Canaanites that had been living in these lands um, before before the Israelites returned from Egypt from exile. No, uh, that's not the case. We will talk about it. Um, well, let's just understand one more thing. The old city of Jerusalem is within the walls, right? So this is the old city. We are walking past the old city. However, this part over here, the city of David is the oldest. So it's even older than the old city. This goes back to the times of King David, which is 3,000 years ago. So the first millennium BCE, and it just exactly here. The Hinnom Valley is exactly over here. So the entire valley goes along the very historic area where lots of roads converged, lots of paths, and then but again, it would be outside of the city of David. It would be outside of the old city of Jerusalem, which means that we know that there is also the laws of purity, and obviously all the cemeteries would be always outside of the old city, outside of the city, right? Hence, there is the Mount of Olives, where where lots of Jewish cemeteries are. Well, hence the same story. Let's get back to the scripture. I'll be quoting lots of episodes from the scripture. Well, let's have a look. What we see here, we see Jewish people sacrificing children to a certain god. It's something quite outrageous, because there's nothing else but idolatry, which well, in Judaism it was the worst of the sins, and yet there were different periods in Jewish history. Well, so along with the Canaanites, which had been living in these lands before the Israelites returned, the Canaanites were pagan tribes, were pagan people that believed in many gods, such as Baal, which we know very well from number of tours, and also I'm sure you're familiar. Asherah, also one of the superior gods of Canaanites, and there was one, the most horrible one. This is the illustration from a very interesting book from the medieval times, the Oedipus Egyptiacus, by a very interesting theologist, Athanasius Kircher. Very interesting, especially the illustrations. Obviously, it's not going to teach you about anything because it's medieval, but it definitely will open your eyes on some things about European and also European history, and also views of the religion. But it doesn't mean that when the Israelites came, the Canaanites disappeared. For a long time, the Canaanites and the Philistines coexisted, and they had been practicing their religion, sacrifice, but just not in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was the city of the Jews. However, well, we all know of King Hezekiah, who was the most righteous of the kings, and you know how he fought the idolatry, and how important the existence of the only temple. But his son Manasseh wasn't that righteous, and actually, well, for those of you familiar with the old scripture, I think you don't even need to be reminded. But the Manasseh was one of the most evil kings, who actually also had a very, very long term, the longest term, 55 years. So he was the son of the Hezekiah, the king Hezekiah. But he himself, the Manasseh, brought the idolatry back to Jerusalem. Well, obviously, still it would be considered inappropriate and horrible to do the sacrifice next to, well, the human sacrifice next to the temple. Obviously not, and it doesn't mean that everyone would do that. But yes, this is known for a fact from the Old Testament, that yes, there was a place, Gei Bechinom, where the children's sacrifice took place. Moloch is the name of well, for a long time it was believed by scholars that Moloch is the name of another deity, but now most historians believe it's just the name of the phenomenon of children's sacrifice. So that's hence the story. I mean, when you look at this just for the first time, you are outraged. How is this even possible? And how is this even possible? That Jewish people would be doing that, and why all of a sudden also Jewish people are wearing interesting hats normally worn by Philistines. So that's the story. For a long time, the Jewish people were tempted by all sorts of things, including that. Yeah, that is true. There are lots of illustrations from the medieval times that Moloch is represented as a creature, something between a human being and a bull. But again, we're not sure whether it's a name. Could be just the name of the ritual, and it would boggle the minds of many people, of many Christians, and not only. By the way, this is a drawing by William Blake, the English poet, and quite an interesting one. Obviously, everyone had their own vision, but well, this is clearly one of the most horrible episodes of the history, not even of only Jewish people in general. And since then, the valley of Hinnom, or Gai ben Hinnom, if you say it quickly, it's Gehenna. And Gehenna is the word, the Gehenna is the word that denotes hell. Because of the horrors that took place in the valley, this area would be cursed forever. And this is the valley of slaughter. This is the valley of pain, the valley of the dead. So this is it. So, and Jeremiah mentioned it so many times. And that's the story. So we actually know where the hell is located. And I believe for a Halloween tour, this nice, green, lush land is the best, really one of the best locations ever. And that's important, like from the Leviticus. Say to the Israelites, any Israelite or any foreigner residing in Israel who sacrifices any of his children to Moloch is to be put to death. The people of the land are to stone him. This is how it was prohibited. So as I said, not all the Jews would do that. It was still the most horrible thing ever. And also this valley, because for a long time there was only human sacrifice, children sacrifice, nobody would want to settle down in there. And obviously, because it's the city of Jerusalem is fortified, nobody would want to live outside of the city walls for very obvious reasons. But we were all talking about one ghost that wanted to go outside the city walls. But that's not the case. This valley would be used as a burial site. Obviously, there is the Mount of Olives, which we will see today as well. We're not going to the Mount of Olives, not today, but I have a video of it. But Mount of Olives would be for the righteous, would be for Jews. But here in the former hell, which is still, I would say, it is still deserted. I mean, people never settled down there, even though in the 19th century the city clearly um, grew from the walls, and it started expansion, but nobody would ever want to live in the valley of Hinnom. And so it was used for burials. All the burials, most of the burials were looted, especially during the times of the Ottomans. And also it's important to understand that there is lootings were of different sorts, and also in more recent history there would be lootings, there would be vandals, and will be just the black diggers, the black archaeologists, I mean, like the black market, that supply the black market, which is flourishing and has always been. So this also throughout history, apart from the cemetery, this valley would be used as a gigantic dump site. And the findings normally different pottery shards and some other waste proves that. So obviously, and those were normally not the Jewish graves. On a good note, recently the city of David has turned this area into a nice recreational zone. There are animals, nobody sacrifices them. You know that. There's a it's just, this is not really highly visited place, the valleys, unfortunately, but locals know. Schools in Israel have trips or arrange trips to this area. You can just be very close to the old city and feel the vibe, but you can also try to at least try to feel what it was like to live in those days. There are lots of activities for families, for children. Well, this is, for example, olive press, and you can even make your own olive oil. This is where you would crush olives, and then you would put them under the press, and then well, depending on how many people there are and how much time you have, it should be prearranged, obviously, but it's not something difficult to make, and it's, especially now, it's not really overbooked. But schools go there, so the place is vibrant. There are lots of people there, not as before. That's a great place. And also here children could just sit by the bonfire and have some meals. They can cook something there. It's a nice place to be. And this is amazing that from those horror that happened with the children in this valley, now this is the place where kids smile, laugh, and enjoy themselves. And the adults are not scared to bring the kids here. Well, but since it's a Halloween tour, we need more atrocities. So how about the Akaldama, or the field of blood, from Hebrew? Well, this area is also not that often visited. We were there when we had a trip. There was we had an interesting day trip, which was, by the way, and it was not an obligatory, it was not a must to visit. That was kind of extra class. So we had a tour on geopolitics in Jerusalem, which is an endless topic, but really opened my eyes on many things as well. And we also had some time. We would be cruising by, well, in between some of the Arab villages. Back then it wasn't well, it's just part of Jerusalem as well, Eastern Jerusalem. And there is a village of Silwan. But well, it was not really scary to be there. And I'm not going into geopolitics now. I'm not going to tell you that it's dangerous to go in Arab villages in Jerusalem. Nowadays the situation is very different, but back then it was totally fine. And we were taken to the places that are, well, I would say not every tourist would go, and also not everyone would know, even not many locals, well, interested in Crusader period. Well, those who were interested in Crusader period, they would know. So when the Crusaders came, and you know that in 1099, this is when the first crusade reached the Holy Land, and in less than 1 year, they conquered Jerusalem, and they immediately launched pilgrimage. With pilgrimage from entire Europe, and there were numbers of institutions, and they started building different guest houses just to prepare the land for the pilgrimage. And there would be lots of pilgrims that many of them would die even before they reached the port of Jaffa. Many of them would die when in Jerusalem. So there were hospitals. There was a hospital by that time, and the Hospitallers, the order of Hospitallers was the order in charge of taking care of the pilgrims, and there was a high mortality rate. And also in the 12th century, there was some epidemics. There's not really much information of what kind of epidemics it was, but people died in volumes every day. And this is believed to be the place where the channel house of or the potter's field was located during Crusader period. And well, I would say everyone is inclined to believe that it was exactly the place because there were found lots of human remains. We're walking on top of the channel house. It's safe to be there now. However, I would not really step over there. So what we're looking at is the roof of the charnel house. And because the people died in so many volumes, nobody had time to arrange the proper burials. The bodies would be just thrown into those pits and holes. So, so Chaudemar from French, I hope I pronounced it right, is also the field of blood. This place was called this way by the Crusaders, and they believed that Chaudemar, the field of blood, was exactly the same place where also another very infamous bloodshed happened, but we will get to that very soon. This is the roof, and I didn't go there. I asked my group mate to take a photo. I didn't go there. I mean, it doesn't really look safe, right? But they claim it's safe, but I don't think so. I just prefer to walk around it and film it from a distance. Well, it is very deep. I didn't want to risk, so I didn't really approach it. But there is two more floors below, and it was filled up with human remains. Um, it's it's not it's not a national park. It's not. It's just one of the multiple ruins you can find all around Jerusalem. This place is deserted, abandoned, and most people well, I would say uh the only people you can come across there would be some shepherds from the nearest neighborhood, from the Arab villages. That's it. And ghosts. So no wonder there are many there are reports on numerous sightings of some people who all of a sudden would disappear in the ruins, some white objects, some people wearing white that all of a sudden would just fade in the fog. Many, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Well, because we know what exactly happened here. So people died not far. People would die not far in the hospital, and then would be brought. Their body would be brought here. And yes, the entire Hinnom Valley is the cemetery, and there are graves there. And you see that these graves, there is a litter in there. There's this garbage. They're open for visits. I mean, they're open for access, so it wasn't really a big deal to see the graves. This is how easily you can find graves in Israel. You don't even need to go to Carmel Mountains like I did for my bed sharing tour that is scheduled for tonight. You just need to basically leave the Jerusalem and walk a little bit in the Kidron Valley. Or, well, Kidron Valley has a bit different story, but okay, the Hinnom Valley. So these graves, there are niches there, right? So for those who are not exactly familiar with the burial practices of the Jewish people, I will just very quickly tell you a few things that normally the bodies, especially in the Second Temple period, would be wrapped in a shroud and put in these niches, burial niches. 1 year later, the family members of the family of the deceased would come, take the bones, put them in a bone box called ossuaries, and this grave would be available to be reused again. To be used again. Normally, each family would have its cave, depending on the size, depending on the size of the family and the budget. Those could be different families. Obviously, this would be quite well of families that had a big cave for them, and it's all hewn in the bedrock, right? So I hope it's quite clear. Unfortunately, yes, you can see there lots of garbage, but let's get back to the Akaldama thing. In the same area, if you just walk a little bit more towards the Arab village, there's an Akaldama monastery. Actually, it's called Saint Onufrius Monastery. It is believed to be the place where the apostles, it's a Greek Orthodox monastery, by the way, where the apostles met after after Jesus was crucified. So hence the monastery was placed on the spot. But whose blood was shed there? Well, with the payment he received for his wickedness, Judas Iscariot, bought a field. There he fell headlong, his body burst open, and all his intestines spilled out. So this is believed to be, according to tradition, this is believed to be the place where Judas Iscariot committed a suicide after he had betrayed Jesus. And you know that he was paid 30 silver coins, yeah, for betrayal. After Jesus was crucified, he went back to Sanhedrin, to the elders. He wanted to return the money, but they mentioned this was the blood money. Then they didn't take them back, so he took the money, bought the potter's field, brought the field, and committed a suicide there. And his blood was all around, and then it was turned into a potter's field, right? So Al-Qaldama is believed to be the place where, first of all, Judas Iscariot shed his blood. And with all these stories of crusaders, with all the stories of the baby sacrifice, Akeldama, it could be spelled with C, it could be spelled with K. This is the monastery. By the way, it's very difficult to visit the monastery, especially if you're not Christian. There are lots of requirements. So I would say it's not really a touristy place. And the entire area doesn't look touristy at all. So there were found lots of graves, about 80 burials, and not all of them are really studied yet. So the bodies are not in there. There is a special entity in Israel that takes care of all the burials, and they rebury human remains, or at least they hide access and try to build nefesh, a special monument that should be placed above the burials, for the soul to be able to access, to go back and forth. And these are the photos from the reports from the archaeological reports of various graves in the area. Well, clearly the graves of the well-to-do people, for sure. Some of them are really ornate. And there is a great article from Shimon Gibson, whom, I have a collection of articles on Jerusalem. He's also very well featured on multiple history shows on Jerusalem. So Shivan Gibson released very interesting reports. As they explored those graves, they managed to find human remains where a piece of the shroud was found. Shroud would normally rot within a year or so. And this is the sample of the shroud that is 2,000 years old, is contemporary to the times of Jesus. Unbelievable. And well, the person was buried the same way, absolutely the same way. And they even managed to extract the DNA from the remains. And they managed to confirm the case of leprosy. Unbelievable. So this is one of the earliest cases of leprosy, which date back to a bit over 2,000 years ago. And we know that leprosy was very, very present and very common, unfortunately, in the times of Jesus. And we know of the miracles that happened. This is the part of the genetic material. I think it's a part of a part of a bone, which is 2,000 years old. Unbelievable. But there are many, many other graves. Right now, these graves are normally used as what is the word for cattle, because there is a cattle grazing in the valley from the cattle that belong to the Arabs. And there was found also this very beautiful grave with very intricate designs. You can see that. And then again, it's all hewn in the rock. Look at this rosette. I wasn't there. This is just a photograph from the internet. I never visited those graves, and we never went there. We only were by the Crusader time, but the Crusader site. And this is and that grave is exceptional. This is clearly Jewish, not Christian, not the Christian burial. And there is also one more very similar rosette found under the Temple Mount, in the passage that is all, the access to which is closed forever by Muslims. And this is the grave of someone very rich. And they found an ossuary there in that very tomb. And they managed to read the name that was carved in the stone, or in one of the sides of the ossuary. Caiaphas. Caiaphas. That I believe it. Well, Caiaphas is one of those elders, or one of those members of Sanhedrin that eventually sanctioned the crucifixion of Jesus. Caiaphas. So this is again one of those episodes when, and this gives me goosebumps. No matter how many times I say that, this is when the Holy Scripture becomes the evidence, becomes exactly the account of events that happened back then, 2,000 years ago. So in the book of Acts 4, said Peter, it's written in the book of Psalms, may his place be deserted, let there be no one to dwell in it, and may another take his place of leadership. This is Peter referring to Judas Iscariot and the place of his suicide. So Peter basically condemned the place. As you can see, this area is not inhabited. Jerusalem has extremely expensive real estate. The land costs, I cannot even imagine the sums of money that how much the land costs there. Yet there are very few areas that have nothing on them, and technically anyone could just purchase the land. Well, technically, I mean, it's there, right? Go ahead, and you'll be living some 10 minutes away from the city of David, and 15 minutes away from Jerusalem, from the old city of Jerusalem. I mean, it's part of Jerusalem, but anyway, but no, because everyone knows nobody wants to live in a place like that. Speaking of Jerusalem growing out of its walls, which happened in mid 19th century, Well, Sir Moses Montefiore, who was a great philanthropist of a Jewish descent, who did a lot for the exploration and for the development of the land for Jewish people, first of all. Well, he was the first one to build the first neighborhood outside of the city walls. It was so crammed. It was so crowded inside the old city, and also the sanitary situation was horrible. Oh, sorry, this bar probably you can't read because of it. So Mishkinot Shananim is the name of the neighborhood. However, people were not really that willing to leave the city because they still felt a lot safer within the walls. And Moses and Sir Montefiore even had to pay to those Jews to move to Mishkinot Shananim. But for the daytime, when they moved in, this is what I'm talking about. These houses over here look like many semi-detached houses, like block of flats over there. You can see it. I Many people would like take money, move in, but would only be there for the daytime, and for nighttime they would go back to the old city because they felt safer within the city walls, even though there was a typhoid, what is the typhoid, plague or whatever. It was still safer to be there than outside of the city walls. And also, there is this famous windmill built by Montefiore. It's still there, and it's a museum. You can visit it. It was open when I was in Jerusalem back in April, and I managed to film, to take some photos. And also next to the windmill, there is the carriage that belonged to Sir Moses Montefiore. However, there was a fire and it was destroyed really badly, but it was restored, and it's now placed in over there in the behind the glass. This is the old photo I sourced from the internet. So that's just the carriage of Sir Moses Montefiore. And the story has it that after Montefiore died, people in Mishkinot Shananim, well, eventually people moved in. They moved in. People started seeing Montefiore just walking back and forth the neighborhood as if, well, inspecting something or just making sure things were doing right, things were going okay. There are many reports like that throughout, let's say, 19th century. Who knows? Even nowadays, Mishkinot Shananim is the ghost neighborhood, because most people that own the apartments there, which are extremely expensive, they don't live in Israel. They're Jewish families that come to Israel for pilgrimage holidays, but most of them normally live in the States most of the year. So it's definitely part of the ghost town. But speaking of cemeteries, we are now looking at the Mount of Olives. Well, the biggest Jewish cemetery. And but below it is another valley that we already mentioned today, the Kidron Valley, of the Valley of the Kings. And there are more mysteries here. Look at this. There are three big graves, tombs, all cut in the rock. And well, about some of them we know more. About one of them we know very little. So you see, this is not far, by the way, from here is the Gethsemane Church, or the Church of the Agony, which I also will be taking you to, because after we are done with the Galilee, we will be switching to Jerusalem and the ministry of Jesus and the places where Jesus stayed when in Jerusalem. However, we know that he didn't live in Jerusalem, but he would visit it like any other Jew for pilgrimage. Well, this is the Kidron Valley. But there is also another name to the valley, to exactly that spot. In Joel, you can find it. I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will put them on trial for what they did to my inheritance, my people Israel, because they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. So Joel was speaking the language of God, So exactly that valley. Well, we also know that the Mount of Olives is the place from where the Messiah would come. Well, Christians believe this is Jesus, and the Jews believe that this is a Messiah, Mashiach. It, it's not relevant who exactly the Messiah will be. What is relevant is that Jehoshaphat, the name, uh, actually it means the judgment, that the God will judge, the Yeshua will judge, and this is the place of the great judgment. Obviously, um, only only wealthy could afford being buried in the valley of judgment, because they would well, it was predicted that the dead would rise from, well, the people would rise from the dead, and these people would definitely be the first, they would get the first row when the Messiah comes. So the Kidron Valley, well, the Kidron Valley is big, it's really long, and we are in this area over here. Actually, well, when I filmed that, I was standing, I was with my back to the eastern wall of Jerusalem, not far from the golden gates through which Messiah would enter the old city. Well, there's one tomb that is a mystery. It is referred to as the Absalom tomb. And Absalom was the son of King David, also with a quite an infamous son who challenged his father, and he even tried to take his place, to take the throne, and David even had to flee, but eventually David won and Absalom died. And for many, just somehow the tradition was started that exactly in this place exactly this would be the Absalom tomb. Some historians, well, if it's Absalom, then it should be. So this is the view overlooking the eastern wall of Jerusalem. This is the photo taken in late 19th century under the Ottomans. And well, and you can see, well, that's the Mount of Olives, and that's, well, the Gethsemane is a little bit over there. Well, anyway, so we're here. This is also a photo from the internet. I'm not even sure which year it is. What is important to know that if it's Absalom, it should be 3,000 years old. But historians now claim that it's Second Temple period, and looks like it's also contemporary to times of Jesus, which is clearly 1,000 years later. But it's also very difficult to date rocks. That's the big problem. So carbon-14 doesn't help here. But what helps is the looks. There are two more graves that are connected with the so-called Absalom tomb, and they would belong to different families, but they're like bigger, one big complex. The amazing thing about the so-called Absalom tomb is that it's the one piece all cut from the rock. Everything is cut from one rock. This is for the late 19th century stereophotography, 3D. And as you see, it really hasn't changed. And that's the Mary Magdalene Church over there on the Mount of Olives, Russian church, where the sister of the last Russian empress is buried, Elizaveta. I have the video. Very bad one, very bad one. I didn't have my gimbal with me on that day, but I still filmed it. This is my photo, by the way. So it's still a big question whether it's Absalom or it's someone else. And if it's someone else, who could that be? You can clearly see the Ionic capitelis of columns. They're not really columns, they are pilasters, the imitation of columns, right? And you can clearly see the well, like classicistic features of their architecture. Clearly, the Hellenistic architecture. However, there is something also very significant on the top. Well, there is this interesting cone on the top, and the dome and the cone, which is very similar to one grave which we actually visited. But anyway, so there is no access to to this particular grave, but there are, well, now there is no access, but technically, well, anyone could access, but it's now closed. Exactly here. This is the photos from the internet. I think it's even from Wikipedia. It's just a combination of different photographs together, photoshopped, and also found from Wikipedia. Clearly, there is no name, so we don't know, and probably this will always be a mystery. But tradition is tradition, so it's still called Absalom tomb. However, it's not 100% clear whether it's actually Absalom tomb and whether it's 3,000 years old. But as we walk, we will see two more burials, two more tombs. Tomb of Ney Hatzir. Ney Hatzir is is the sons of Hatzir, the family, or the priestly family, by the way. So Hatzir, we know that he served in the temple, and it was all looted when it was discovered by Palestine Exploration Fund. And Palestine is the name of the region, right? This is how the region was referred to throughout, well, ever since the Roman times, because the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and built the pagan city instead of it. And they also erased the name of Judea and called this land Syria Palestina, from the word Plishtim, the guests, the newcomers. And then during the Ottoman period, they would refer to this land as Ottoman Palestine because the empire was huge and they needed somehow to differentiate the areas they were talking about. I've just said it again and again, uh, in case someone new is going to be watching our tours. But it's not about geopolitics; it's about history. So, when Palestine Exploration Fund came in the late 19th century, the tombs were all empty, looted. However, this inscription is still there. That's why we know who the tomb belonged to. Hetzir family, the priestly family, Kohanim, the Cohens. Photos taken by Palestine Exploration Fund, also some illustrations. And well, that's the Bnei Hatzir tomb. And over here, there is another tomb, all hewn in the rock. It reminds us of Petra, right? Tomb of Zechariah. So we also been, well, not me, but we were also able to identify the tomb. Also priestly family. One can visit. There are steps one can visit and actually can walk quite far. I didn't really go really far, but my group mates did. And it just feels weird. um well, I walked a little, just a little bit, but that's okay. So again, whoever the Absalom is, well, whether it's Absalom tomb or not, that's one question. But well, since we see these beautiful tombs, clearly very expensive, we can understand that also all the other graves in Kidron Valley are also quite special. So uh, uh, it's possible to visit. It was possible to visit from there. So, well, some areas are closed, but some areas are open. It just depends on how willing you are to go inside. So speaking of the Absalom cave, well, I just mentioned the interesting shape that might remind us of something. For those who watched my tours on Herodian, this may remind us of the alleged grave of Herod the Great that looked like that. This is just a recreation of it, just a model. And some claim that, okay, if Herod was buried in Herodion, which is most which is true, um, This it's still the question. Well, it's okay. It's not 100% sure that Herod was buried in Herodion, but if Herod had been, if Herod was buried in Herodion, then it's quite possible that his son, another king of Judea, Herod Agrippus, was buried in that tomb that is now called Absalom tomb. Okay, well, and okay, just I'm going to be very quick. I promise take you to Safed, and I'll just overrun a little bit if you don't mind. So now let's talk about some mysticism, and we're going to Safed. But before we go to Safed, let me um look at this beautiful illustration by Ephraim Moshe Lillian, about whom I talked on my last episode of the tours of Israel, Israel Museum. So the book. What is a dibuk? It's a creature that's quite often mentioned in Kabbalah, in well in this like very um how shall I put it, as a well kind of a movement in Judaism, well teachings full of mysticism and spiritualism. Well, the Dybbuk is a creature. It's actually the dead soul of a human that died before they could repent, or the sinner that hadn't really uh, well, that also hadn't redeemed for the sins. And this soul, this that soul would attach to a human. And I think this illustration pretty much explains what it is. It's well, Dibuk. The Dibuk is mentioned in some Ashkenazi sources, and also, we cannot do without the book in Safed, because Safed is one of the cities in the north of Israel where the Jewish population would be always quite strong, especially in the past 400 years. As you know, that after the Jewish revolt and after Bar Kokhba revolt, which is first and second century Common Era, um, Jews that survived would flee to the north, which was no longer the Judea. And well, Safed is now one of the centers. Also, there is Tiberias, Tveria, Tiberias. And well, Safed is also the place where so many rabbis lived and died. I will mention some of them. So there is a story um, in Safed that in the 18th century there was a woman that all of a sudden was um, experiencing was really unusual things around her, and then all of a sudden she herself would be possessed by something. The video, it's just my video walking down the streets of Safed. When I'm ready, I'll clearly be scheduling tours. I managed to film some beautiful synagogues and just the beautiful blue and white streets of Safed. So she was possessed. She all of a sudden would be yelling at people and would be throwing things at people, and she would be well, extremely strong, like she never was really that strong before. And also she would start cursing in the languages she never spoken before. So she was clearly possessed, and she was dangerous. Luckily, there was a rabbi that lived at that time. So Solomon Alkabetz, I think he was from Greece originally. And so he managed to, well, he did the exorcism, and he managed to cast away this dibuk from the woman. And according to some sources from Ashkenazi literature, the dibuk would leave your body. Um, what do you call it? So there is a pinky finger, but the toe. So the small toe on your leg, and this is how the dibuk would leave your body. And there would be just a very very small kind of scratch as if you just uh tripped or hit something with the leg. That's the story. And as you know, I like history, and there is some continuation. There are multiple cases of debugs. There was also a totally fiction story of the debug box and there is even film, American film, Hollywood film, called the debug box, but it's all fiction. What is not fiction is that, oh, and by the way, before I forget, one of the rabbis, very famous ones that lived and suffered and buried and suffered, is Rabbi Yosef Karo, who is the author of the very important book, Shulchan Aruch. I'm not going into details now, but when we visit Safed for another tour, not Halloween tour, we will be talking about it a bit more. However, I also prefer to focus not on the teaching, not on theology, but on history and some culture related aspects. But well, we'll mention a few things, that's for sure. So the debug, there were multiple stories of possessions in Christianity too. So with with the Jews, in the Kabbalah traditions, and there were many stories like that, especially in Eastern Europe, because this is well, mostly coming from Ashkenazi Jews, and there was a person, a writer, Shimon Rappaport, but you probably know him as Ansky. He was from Shtetl in the Russian Empire, and he wrote a story on Dybbuk. And it was so popular that in 1924 it was turned into a performance in the Habima Theater in Moscow. The story of Dybbuk. So the woman, that's exactly the story that happened in Safed, inspired Esansky to write that novel on about that woman possessed by a Dybbuk. This is the photograph taken in 1920, not in 1924, 1920, in Moscow in the Habima Jewish Theater, and the actress is Hannah Rubina. Hannah Ruvina, and Hannah Rovina is she was I would say, Dolly, is it okay to compare her to Marilyn Monroe in a way, like a Jewish Marilyn Monroe? Uh, oh, sorry, I'm not sure what that is. Anyway, so she became, well, I would say, famous throughout the Jewish world after that role. Eventually, she made Aliyah as well as the Habima Theater, and that very famous theater in Tel Aviv is actually the child and the brainchild of the people that arranged the Habima Theater back in Moscow. And Hannah Rubina was the number one star up until her death. Thank you so much, Priya. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, everyone, Julian. And the flowers were beautiful indeed. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest. And I'll see you in less than 15 minutes on my YouTube channel for a bed sharing tour. Oh, so many graves today. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.